Okay, boys and girls, it's our last video for this book. Chapter 20, Billings. On a bright, clear day in January, Lewis and Serena came home to the Red Rock Lakes. From among the thousands of waterfowl, they quickly found the members of their own family, their fathers and mothers and sisters and brothers. It was a noisy homecoming. Everybody wanted to say hello at once. Ka-ho, ka-ho, ka-ho! The wanderers were home at last. Lewis's father, the old cob, made a graceful speech, rather long but sincere. Lewis raised his trumpet and played "There's No Place Like Home, 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 Sweet Home." There was a great deal of gossip among the waterfowl about Lewis's having persuaded Serena to be his wife. Everybody congratulated the happy couple, and all of the brothers and sisters of Lewis and Serena gathered around and looked at Lewis's possessions. They were much impressed by his worldly goods. They liked the life-saving medal. They loved the sounds of the trumpet. And they were eager to see the money in the money bag. But Lewis did not open the bag. Instead, he took his father and mother to one side. They all three stepped out on shore, where Lewis slipped the money bag off of his neck and, with a bow, handed it to the old cob. $4,420.78. Then Lewis took his slate and wrote a note to the owner of the music store in Billings, so his father would have something to show them when he got there. The note said, "To the storekeeper of Billings, enclosed, please find $4,420.78. It will pay you for the trumpet and the damage to the store. Sorry about the inconvenience this has caused you." The old cob was not able to count the money, and he was not able to read, but he took the money bag and the slate and he hung them around his neck. He felt sure now that he could pay his debt for the stolen trumpet. "I shall go," he said to his wife. "I shall redeem my honor. I shall return to Billings, the scene of my crime, a great city teeming with life." "We've heard that before," remarked his wife. "Just take the money and the note and beat it for Billings as fast as you can go. And when you get there, for heaven's sakes, be careful. The owner of that music store has a gun, and he'll remember the last time he saw a swan coming at him. He got robbed. So watch yourself. You're on a dangerous mission." "Danger," said the old cob. "Danger. I welcome danger and adventure. Danger is my middle name. I would risk my life to redeem my honor and recapture my sense of decency. I shall pay my debt and blot out the foul mark that sullies my good name. I shall rid myself forever of the shame that comes from thievery and wrongdoing. I shall—" "If you don't stop talking," said his wife, "you won't get to Billings before the store closes." "You are right, as usual," replied the cob. He adjusted the money bag and the slate for flight. Then he took off into the air and headed towards the northeast, flying fast and high. His wife and son watched him until he faded from view. "What a swan," said his wife. "You have a good father, Lewis. I hope nothing happens to him. To tell you the truth, I'm worried." The old cob flew fast and far. When he spied the churches and factories and shops and homes of Billings, he circled once, then began his downward glide, straight for the music store. "My hour has come," he said to himself. "My moment of truth is at hand. I shall soon be out of debt, out from under the cloud of shame and dishonor that has cast a shadow over my life for lo these many months." The cob had been seen already by people down below. One of the salesmen in the music store was standing by the front window looking out. When he saw that big white bird approaching, he yelled to the storekeeper, large bird approaching, get your gun!" The storekeeper grabbed his shotgun and raced to the sidewalk. The cob was low in the sky, gliding straight for the store. The storekeeper raised his gun. He fired both barrels in quick succession. The old cob felt a twinge of pain in his left shoulder. Thoughts of death filled his mind. Looking back, he saw a bright red drop of blood staining his breast, but he kept going straight for the storekeeper. The end is near, he said to himself. I shall die in the performance of duty. I have only a few moments remaining to live. Man, in his folly, has given me a mortal wound. The red blood flows in a steady trickle from my veins. My strength fails, but even in death's final hour, I shall deliver the money for the trumpet. Goodbye, life. Goodbye, beautiful world. Goodbye, little lakes in the north. Farewell, springtimes I have known, with their passion and ardor. Farewell, loyal wife, loving sons and daughters. I, who am about to die, salute you. I must die gracefully, as only a swan can. With that, he sank to the sidewalk. He held out the money bag and the slate to the astonished storekeeper and fainted away at the sight of his own blood. He lay limp on the sidewalk, to all appearances a dying swan. A crowd quickly gathered. "What's this?" exclaimed the storekeeper, bending over the bird. "What's going on here?" He quickly read the note on the slate. Then he tore open the money bag and began pulling out $100 bills and $50 bills. A policeman hurried to the scene and started to hold the crowd back. "Stand back," he shouted. "The swan is wounded. Give him air." "He's dead," said a little boy. "The bird is dead." "He's not dead," said the salesman. "He's scared." "Call an ambulance," screamed a lady in the crowd. A small pool of blood was forming under the neck of the old cob. He seemed lifeless. Just then a game warden appeared. What that means is a person who cares for wildlife. "Who shot this bird?" he demanded. "I did," said the storekeeper. "Then you are under arrest," said the warden. "What for?" asked the shopkeeper. "For shooting a trumpet or swan. These birds are protected by law. You can't pull a gun on a wild swan." "Well," replied the storekeeper, "you can't arrest me either. I happen to know this bird. He's a thief. He's the one you should arrest. He's been here before, and he stole a trumpet from my store." "Call an ambulance," cried a lady. "What's that you've got in your hand?" asked the policeman. The storekeeper quickly stuffed the money back into the money bag and held the bag and the slate behind his back. "Come on, show it to me," said the cop. "I want to see it too," said the warden. "We all want to see it," cried a fellow in the crowd. "What's in the bag?" The storekeeper sheepishly handed the money bag and the slate to the game warden. The warden stood straight, put on his glasses, and read the note in a loud voice. "To the storekeeper of Billings. Enclosed, please find $4,420.78. This will pay for the trumpet and any damage to the store. Sorry about the inconvenience this has caused you." At the mention of the sum of money, the crowd gasped. Everyone started talking at once. "Call an ambulance," screamed the lady. "I have to take that money to the station house," said the policeman. "This is a complicated case. Anything that involves money is complex. I'll take the money and keep it safe until the matter is decided." "No, you won't," said the game warden. "The money is mine." "Why?" asked the policeman. "Because," said the warden. "Because what?" said the policeman. "Because the law says the bird is in my custody. The money was on the bird. Therefore, the money goes with me until this is settled." "Oh, no, you don't," the storekeeper said angrily. "The money is mine. It says so right here on the slate. $4,420.78 is mine. Nobody's going to take it away from me." "Yes, they are," said the policeman. "I am." "No, I am," said the game warden. "Is there a lawyer in the crowd?" asked the storekeeper. "We'll settle this matter right here and now." A tall man stepped forward. I'm Judge Ricketts," he said. "I'll decide this case. Now then, who saw the bird arrive?" "I did," said the salesman. "Call an ambulance," screamed a lady. "I saw the bird too," said a small boy named Alfred Gore. "Okay," said the judge. "Describe what happened exactly as you saw it." The salesman spoke first. "Well," he said, "I was looking out the window and I saw a swan approaching. So I hollered. The boss got his gun and fired, and the bird fell into the sidewalk. There was a drop or two of blood." "Did you notice anything special about the bird?" asked Judge Ricketts. He carried money, replied the salesman. You don't often see money on a bird, so I noticed it. All right, said the judge. Now we'll let Alfred Gore tell what he saw. Describe what you saw, Alfred. Well, said the tiny boy, I was very thirsty, and so I wanted to go to the candy store to get something to drink. Just tell what you saw, please, Alfred, said the judge. Never mind how thirsty you were. I was coming along the street, continued Alfred, because I was very thirsty. So I was coming along the street on my way to the candy store to get something to drink, and there, up in the sky, all of a sudden, there was a big white bird right over me in the sky, and he was sliding out his arms and imitated a bird. And so when I saw the big bird, I stopped thinking about how thirsty I was, and pretty soon this enormous bird, he was enormous, was on the sidewalk, and he was dead, and there was blood all over everything, and that's what I saw. Did you notice anything special about the bird? Asked Judge Ricketts. Blood, said Alfred. Anything else? No, just blood. Did you hear a gun? No, just blood, said Alfred. Thank you, said the judge. That will be all. Just then a siren started wailing. Wow, wow, wow. An ambulance came screaming down the street. It stopped in front of the crowd. 2 men jumped out. They carried a stretcher and set it down next to where the swan lay. The old cob lifted his head and looked around. I have been at death's door, he thought, and now I think I am returning to life. I am reviving. I shall live. I shall return on strong wings to the great sky. I shall glide gracefully again on the ponds of the world and hear the frogs and take pleasure in the sounds of night and the coming of day. As he was thinking these pleasant thoughts, he felt himself being lifted. The ambulance attendants put his slate around his neck, picked him up, laid him gently on a stretcher, and carried him into the ambulance, which had a red light swirling around and around on top of it. One of the men placed an oxygen mask over the old cob's head and gave him some oxygen. And away they drove, making a great deal of noise, to the hospital. There he was put in a bed and given a shot of penicillin. A young doctor came in and examined the wound where the shotgun pellet had hit him. The doctor said the wound was superficial. The old cob didn't know what superficial meant, but it sounded serious. Nurses gathered around. One of them took the swan's blood pressure and wrote something on a chart. The old cob was beginning to feel very well again. It felt good to be in bed, cared for by nurses, one of whom was quite pretty. The doctor washed the wound and put a Band-Aid on it. Meantime, back on the sidewalk in front of the music store, the judge was announcing his decision. On the basis of the testimony, he said solemnly, I award the money to the storekeeper to make up for the loss of the trumpet and the damage to the store. I am placing the swan in the custody of the game warden. Your Honor, said the warden, don't forget that the storekeeper is under arrest for shooting a wild swan. It was a case of false arrest, said the judge wisely. The storekeeper fired his gun at the bird because he was afraid his store would be robbed again. He did not know that the swan was bringing money to pay for the trumpet. The gun was fired in self-defense. Everyone is innocent. The swan is honest. The debt is paid. The storekeeper is rich. And the case is dismissed. A cheer went up from the crowd. The warden looked sulky. The policeman looked glum, but the storekeeper was beaming. He was a happy man. He felt that justice had been done. I have an announcement, he said. I am only going to keep enough of this money to pay for the stolen trumpet and the repair bills for my store. All of the rest of the money will be given to a good cause, if I can think of one, if I can think of just the right one. Can anyone think of a worthy cause that needs money? The Salvation Army, suggested a woman. No, said the storekeeper. The Boy Scouts, suggested a boy. No. The American Civil Liberties Union, suggested a man. No, said the storekeeper. Nobody has thought of just the right place for me to spend this money. How about the Audubon Society? Asked a little fellow whose nose looked like the beak of a bird. That's like a bird sanctuary kind of place where they care for birds. Great, you've got it, cried the storekeeper. A bird has been very good to me, and now I want to do something for birds. The Audubon Society is kind to birds. I want this money to be used to help birds. Some birds are in real trouble. They face extinction. What's extinction? Asked Alfred Gore. Does it mean they stink? Certainly not, said the storekeeper. Extinction is what happens when they are extinct, when you don't exist anymore because there are no others like you. Like the passenger pigeon and the eastern heath hen and the dodo and the dinosaur. The trumpeter swan was almost extinct, said the game warden. People kept shooting them, like this crazy storekeeper, but now they're making a comeback. The storekeeper glared at the warden. I'll say they're making a comeback, he said. The swan that was just here came back to Billings with $4,420.78 and gave it all to me. I call that making a very good comeback. I can't imagine where he got all that money. It's a mighty funny thing. The storekeeper went back into his music store. The policeman went back to the station house. The judge went back to the courthouse. The game warden walked off down the street towards the hospital. And Alfred Gore, who was still thirsty, continued his journey to the candy store. All the rest of the people wandered away. At the hospital, the old cob lay peacefully in bed thinking beautiful thoughts. He felt thankful to be alive and relieved to be out of debt. It was getting dark. Many of the patients in the hospital were asleep already. A nurse came into the cob's room and opened his window. When she came back a few minutes later to take the cob's temperature and to give him a back rub, the bed was empty. The room was deserted. The cob had jumped out the window, spread his broad wings, and headed home through the cold night sky. He flew all night, crossed the mountains, and arrived home soon after daylight, where his wife was waiting for him. How'd it go? She asked. Very well, he said. An extraordinary adventure. I was shot at, just as you predicted. The storekeeper pointed a gun at me and fired. I felt an agonizing pain in my left shoulder, which I've always considered my more beautiful of the two shoulders. Blood gushed from my wound in torrents, and I sank gracefully to the sidewalk, where I handed over the money and thus regained my honor and decency. I was at death's door. A great multitude of people gathered. Blood was everywhere. Was it really, boys and girls? Didn't the boy say or something like 1 or 2 drops? I became faint and passed out with dignity in front of all. The police arrived, dozens of them. Game wardens flocked to the scene in great numbers. And there was a tremendous argument about the money. How did you know all of this if you were unconscious? Asked his wife. My dear, said the cob, I wish you wouldn't interrupt me when I'm telling the story of my trip. Seeing my grave condition, someone in the crowd summoned an ambulance, and I was taken to the hospital, where I was put to bed. I looked very beautiful lying there, my black bill contrasting with the snowy white sheets. Doctors and nurses attended me and comforted me in my hour of suffering and pain. You can judge how serious my wound was when I tell you that one of the doctors examined it and said it was superficial. Boys and girls, superficial actually means that it's no big deal, it's just a little scrape. It doesn't look that bad to me, said his wife. I think you just got nicked. If it had been bad, you couldn't have flown back so soon. Anyways, superficial or not, I'm glad to see you're home safe. I always miss you when you're gone. I don't know why, but I do. With that, she placed her head across his neck and gave him a slight nudge. Then they had breakfast and went for a swim in an open place in the frozen lake. The cob pulled off his Band-Aid and threw it away. Last chapter. Chapter 21, The Greening Spring. Louis and Serena were more in love than ever. When spring came, they flew north. Louis wearing his trumpet and his slate and his chalk pencil and his medal, Serena wearing nothing at all. Now that he no longer had to work and earn, Louis felt a great sense of relief. No more would he have to carry a money bag around his neck. The two swans flew high and fast, 10,000 feet above earth. They arrived at last in a little pond in the wilderness where Louis had been hatched. This was his dream, to return with his love to the place in Canada where he had first seen the light of day. He escorted Serena from one end of the pond to the other and back again. He showed her the tiny island where his mother's nest had been. He showed her the log Sam Beaver had been sitting on when Louis had pulled his shoelace because he couldn't say beep. Serena was enchanted. They were in love. It was spring. The frog was waking from his long sleep. The turtle was coming to life again after his nap. The chipmunk felt the warm air, soft and kind, blow through the trees, just as it did that springtime when Louis's father and mother had visited the pond to nest and raise their young. The sun shone down, strong and steady. Ice was melting. Patches of open water appeared on the pond. Louis and Serena felt the changing world, and they stirred with new life and rapture and hope. There was a smell in the air, a smell of earth waking after its long winter. The trees were putting out tiny green buds. The buds were swelling. A better, easier time was at hand. A pair of mallard ducks flew in. A sparrow with a white throat arrived and sang, "Oh, sweet Canada, Canada, Canada." Serena chose a muskrat lodge on which to build her nest. It was the right height above the water. The muskrats had built it of mud and sticks. Louis had hoped his wife might decide to make her nest in the same spot where his mother had built hers. But females are full of notions. They want their own way, pretty much, and Serena knew what she was doing. Louis was so delighted when he saw her begin to construct the nest. He didn't really care where it was. He raised his horn to his mouth and played the beginning of an old song called, "It's Delightful to be Married, to be married." Then he helped by bringing a few pieces of coarse grass. Rain or shine, cold or warm, every day was a happy day for the two swans. In time, the eggs were laid and the cygnets were hatched, 4 of them. The first sound the baby swans heard was the pure, strong sound of their father's trumpet. "Oh, ever in the greening spring," he played, "by bank and bough retiring." Life was gay and busy and sweet in the little lonely pond in the North Woods. Once in a while, Sam Beaver would show up for a visit, and they would have great times together. Louis never forgot his old jobs, his old friends, or his promise to the head man in charge of birds in Philadelphia. As the years went by, he and Serena returned each spring to the pond, nested, and had their young. And each year, at the end of the summer, when the molt was over and the flight feathers grew back and the cygnets were ready to try their wings, Louis took his family for a long pleasure trip across America. He led them first to Camp Kookooskoos, where he had saved the life of Applegate Skinner and won his medal. The camp would be closed for the season, but Louis liked to revisit it and wander around, remembering the boys and how he had earned his first $100 as camp bugler. Then the swans would fly to Boston, where the swan boat man always gave them a big welcome. Louis would polish up his horn and blow the spit out of it and swim in front of the boats again, playing "Row, row, row your boat." And the people of Boston would hear the familiar sound of the trumpet of the swan and would flock to the public garden. Then the boatmen would treat Louis and Serena to a night at the Ritz Hotel, while the cygnets spent the night by themselves on the lake, watched over by the boatmen. Serena dearly loved the Ritz. She ate dozens of watercress sandwiches and gazed at herself in the mirror and swam in the bathtub. And while Louis stood and looked out the window at the public garden down below, Serena would walk around and around, turning lights on and off for the fun of it. Then they would both get in the bathtub and go to sleep. From Boston, Lewis would lead his family to the Philadelphia Zoo and show them Bird Lake. Here, he would be greeted warmly by the head man in charge of birds. If the zoo needed a young trumpet or swan to add to its collection of waterfowl, Lewis would donate one of his cygnets, just as he had promised. In later years, Philadelphia was also the place where they would see Sam Beaver. Sam took a job with the zoo just as soon as he was old enough to go to work. He and Lewis always had a great time when they got together. Lewis would get out his slate and they would have long talks about old times. After visiting Philadelphia, Lewis would fly south with his wife and children so they could see the great savannas where alligators dozed in swamp water and turkey buzzards soared in the air. And then they would return home to spend winter in the Red Rock Lakes of Montana, in the lovely, serene Centennial Valley, where all trumpeter swans felt safe and unafraid. The life of a swan must be a very pleasant and interesting life. And of course, Lewis's life was particularly pleasant because he was a musician. Lewis took good care of his trumpet. He kept it clean and spent hours polishing it with the tips of his wing feathers. As long as he lived, he felt grateful to his father, the brave cob who had risked his life in order to give him the trumpet he needed so badly. Every time Lewis looked at Serena, he remembered that the sound of the trumpet was what made her willing to become his mate. Swans often lived to be very old. Year after year, Lewis and Serena returned in spring to the same small pond in Canada to raise their family. The days were peaceful. Always, just at the edge of dark, when the young cygnets were getting sleepy, Lewis would raise his horn and play taps, just as he used to do at camp long ago. The notes were sad and beautiful as they floated across the still water and up into the night sky. One summer, when Sam Beaver was about 20, he and his father were sitting in their camp in Canada. It was after supper. Mr. Beaver was rocking in a chair, resting after a day of fishing. Sam was reading a book. "Pop," said Sam, "what does crepuscular mean?" "How should I know?" replied Mr. Beaver. "I've never heard that word before." "It has something to do with rabbits," said Sam. "It says here that a rabbit is a crepuscular animal." "Probably means timid," said Mr. Beaver. "Or maybe it means that they can run like the dickens. Or maybe it means stupid. A rabbit will sit right in the middle of a road at night and stare at your headlights and never get out of the way. That's how a lot of rabbits get run over. They're stupid." "Well," said Sam, "I guess the only way to find out what crepuscular means is to look it up in the dictionary." "We haven't got a dictionary here," said Mr. Beaver. "You'll have to wait till we get back to the ranch." Just then, over at the pond where the swans were, Lewis raised his horn and played taps to let his children know that their day had come to an end. The wind was right. The sound carried across the swamp. Mr. Beaver stopped rocking. "That's funny," he said. "I thought I heard the sound of a trumpet just then." "I don't see how you could," replied Sam. "We're alone in these woods." "I know we are," said Mr. Beaver. "Just the same, I thought I heard a trumpet or a bugle." Sam chuckled. He had never told his father about the swans in the pond nearby. He kept their secret to himself. When he went to the pond, he always went alone. That's the way he liked it. That's the way the swans liked it. "Whatever happened to your friend Lewis?" asked Mr. Beaver. "Lewis was a trumpeter. You don't suppose he's somewhere around here, do you?" "He might be," said Sam. "Have you heard from him recently?" asked Mr. Beaver. "No," said Sam. "He doesn't write anymore. He ran out of postage stamps, and he has no money to buy stamps with." "Oh," said Mr. Beaver. "Well, the whole business about that bird was very queer. I never did fully understand it." Sam looked across at his father and saw that his eyes had closed. Mr. Beaver was falling asleep. There was hardly a sound to disturb the stillness of the woods. Sam was tired and sleepy too. He got out his notebook and sat down at the table by the light of the kerosene lamp, and this is what he wrote. "Tonight I heard Lewis's horn. My father heard it too. The wind was right, and I could hear the notes of taps just as darkness fell. There is nothing in all of the world that I like better than the trumpet of the swan. What does crepuscular mean? Sam put his notebook away. He undressed and slid into bed. He lay there wondering what crepuscular meant. In less than 3 minutes, he was fast asleep. On the pond where the swans were, Louis put his trumpet away. The cygnets crept under their mother's wings. Darkness settled on the woods and fields and marsh. A loon called its wild night cry. As Louis relaxed and prepared for sleep, his thoughts were of how lucky he was to inhabit such a beautiful earth. How lucky he had been to solve his problems with music, and how pleasant it was to look forward to another night of sleep and another day tomorrow, and the fresh morning and the light that returns with each day. Did you love it? I love that book. Such a good book, especially for springtime. Okay, friends, finish up your last comprehension papers. And then will you do the same thing that you did with the Secret Garden? And after you've finished, go back, start at chapter 1, make sure you've answered all the questions. If you have any blank or any missing, fill them in. And then will you just take me on a tour? Maybe have somebody else hold the, put your book down on the table, your notebook. Have somebody else maybe hold the camera for you. Because if it's moving all over the place and you're setting it down and picking it up, it starts to make me dizzy. So if you could maybe have somebody else hold it, and then you can flip the pages while the book is sitting on the table, that would be great. Try not to do the, set it down, turn the page, pick it back up. Okay, please. Okay, and then send that to me whenever you're ready. And we're done with another book. All right, my friends, talk to you later.